The text message glowed on my phone at 2:47 a.m. Spin class running late again. Don't wait up. A. I stared at the screen from my position on the living room couch, a half-empty beer growing warm in my hand. David Halperin, attorney at law, reduced to playing detective in his own marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spent 15 years helping other people navigate their divorces, yet here I was, blind to my own wife's deception. Alicia's car pulled into our driveway in Millbrook, New York, at exactly 3:15 a.m. I'd been timing these late classes for 2 weeks now. Funny how a woman who complained about getting up before 9 suddenly developed such dedication to fitness that required her presence until the early morning hours. The front door opened with the soft click she'd perfected, the sound of someone trying not to wake a sleeping spouse. I listened to her heels tap against our hardwood floors, each step a small lie echoing through our home. "How was the workout?" I called from the darkness of the living room. She jumped, her hand flying to her chest. "Jesus, Dave, you scared me." "Sorry. Couldn't sleep. How was spin class?" Alicia smoothed her hair, which looked suspiciously perfect for someone who'd just finished an intense workout. "Fine. Didn't break much of a sweat tonight." That was the first truth she'd told me in weeks. She headed toward the stairs, gym bag slung over her shoulder. "I'm exhausted. See you in the morning." "Actually, could you grab me some water from the kitchen? My back's killing me." It was a test. A simple request that would require her to set down that gym bag for just a moment. She hesitated, and in that pause, I saw everything I needed to know. "Of course," she said, forcing a smile. The moment she disappeared into the kitchen, I moved. 15 years of practicing law had taught me the value of evidence, and Alicia had just given me the perfect opportunity to collect some. Her gym bag sat on the bottom step, partially unzipped. Inside, beneath a pristine towel that had never seen a drop of sweat, I found a hotel key card from the Marriott downtown. Below that, a crumpled receipt for 2 dinners at Chez Laurent, the same restaurant where I'd proposed to her 8 years ago. The final piece of evidence made my stomach turn. A used condom wrapper, carelessly shoved into the side pocket. I quickly photographed everything with my phone, my hands surprisingly steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Here's your water," Alicia said, returning with a glass. "Thanks." I accepted it with a smile that felt like broken glass. "Sleep well." She kissed my forehead, another small betrayal, and headed upstairs. I waited until I heard our bedroom door close before I moved to her laptop, which she'd left charging on the kitchen counter. Alicia had always been careless with technology. Her password was still our wedding date, which now seemed like the cruelest joke of all. It took me less than 5 minutes to find the hidden folder labeled E. The photos were explicit. The messages were worse. "Evan, can't wait to have you all to myself. Dave suspect anything?" Alicia, he's clueless, too busy with his pathetic little law practice to notice. I'm planning a clean break soon. Evan, good. You deserve better than some small-town lawyer. Alicia, I know. I've wasted enough years playing house with him. I scrolled through months of messages, each one a knife twist. They'd been planning this for half a year, discussing my shortcomings, my finances, my appearance. Evan Lockwood, I recognize the name now. He was one of the trainers at Alicia's gym, a pretty boy with muscles and an Instagram account full of shirtless selfies. The final message in the thread was from yesterday. "Hotel room is reserved for Thursday. Time to celebrate our future." Thursday. Tomorrow. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark kitchen, processing what I'd learned. My wife of 8 years was having an affair with a gym trainer who looked like he'd stepped off the cover of a fitness magazine. They were planning to end our marriage, and from the sound of their messages, they'd been laughing at me for months. The old Dave would have confronted her immediately, would have demanded explanations, begged for another chance, maybe even fought for a marriage that was already dead. But as I sat there in the darkness of my own home, surrounded by the evidence of my wife's betrayal, I felt something else entirely. I felt calculating. Alicia wanted a clean break? She was about to learn that nothing involving David Halperin was ever that simple. I called in sick to my law practice the next morning, something I hadn't done in 3 years. Instead, I drove to Tommy Kowalski's auto shop on the outskirts of town. Tommy and I had been friends since high school, back when I was just another working-class kid from the wrong side of Millbrook. He was one of the few people who remembered me before I became Alicia's husband. "Dave!" Tommy looked up from under the hood of a Buick, his face breaking into a grin. "What brings you to my palace of grease and broken dreams?" "I need a favor, and it's the kind that requires your particular set of skills." Tommy wiped his hands on a rag, his expression growing serious. "What kind of favor?" "The kind that involves surveillance equipment and a complete lack of moral qualms." "Ah," he nodded knowingly. "Wife troubles?" "You could say that." 20 minutes later, Tommy had equipped me with a GPS tracker the size of a quarter and a crash course in covert surveillance. "This little beauty will tell you everywhere she goes, down to the exact address. Battery lasts 2 weeks. Is this legal? It's your car too, right? Both names on the registration? Yeah. Then you're just keeping track of your own property." That evening, while Alicia showered, I slipped out to the garage and attached the tracker to the undercarriage of her BMW. My hands shook slightly as I worked, not from nerves, but from anticipation. The next morning, Alicia announced she was going shopping with her friend Carla, then hitting the gym for a late afternoon class. I smiled and wished her a good time, then settled in at my computer to watch the GPS tracker do its work. The BMW's first stop was indeed the mall, where it remained for 2 hours. Then it moved to Carla's house for 30 minutes, just long enough for Alicia to maintain her alibi. After that, the car headed directly to the Marriott downtown, where it stayed for 3 hours. I drove to the hotel and positioned myself in the parking lot with a clear view of the entrance. At 4:30 p.m., Alicia emerged with a man who looked like he'd been carved from marble and dipped in protein powder. Evan Lockwood was everything I wasn't: tall, muscled, with the kind of effortless confidence that came from never having to worry about anything more serious than which supplement to take. They kissed goodbye in the parking lot, his hands roaming over her body with the casual ownership of someone who'd done this many times before. I photographed everything, my telephoto lens capturing their intimacy in brutal detail. But I wanted more than just evidence. I wanted to understand exactly what I was dealing with. That weekend, I drove to Roxanne's bar, a local dive that served as Millbrook's unofficial information exchange. Roxanne Murphy had owned the place for 20 years and knew every secret in town. She also happened to be someone I'd dated briefly in college before Alicia swept into my life with her promises of a better future. "Well, well," Roxanne said as I settled onto a bar stool. "David Halperin gracing my establishment. What's the occasion?" "Can't a man drink in peace?" "Not when that man looks like he's been hit by a truck." She poured me a whiskey without asking what I wanted. "Wife troubles?" Before I could answer, I heard familiar laughter from the corner booth. Alicia's friends, Carla, Sophie, and 2 others I didn't recognize, were deep in conversation over cosmopolitans. "Speak of the devil," Roxanne murmured, following my gaze. I positioned myself where I could hear their conversation without being seen. "Finally found someone who appreciates her," Carla was saying. "Evan's got his own business, drives a brand new Jeep, and actually works out. Not like Dave sitting behind a desk all day." "She's been miserable for years," Sophie added. "I kept telling her she married too young. Dave's nice enough, but he's so ordinary." "Ordinary and broke," another voice chimed in. "Did you see his car? It's older than my nephew." They all laughed, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. "When's she going to tell him?" Carla asked. "Soon," Sophie replied. "She's just waiting for the right moment. Evan's been pushing her to move in with him." I finished my drink and left cash on the bar. Roxanne caught my eye as I headed for the door. "Dave," she called softly. I turned back. "Whatever you're thinking of doing, be smart about it." I nodded. "Don't worry, I'm always smart about everything." That was my first lie of the evening, but it wouldn't be my last. Monday morning brought a new development. Mrs. Bohms, our 70-year-old neighbor who spent most of her retirement watching the street from her front window, cornered me as I retrieved my newspaper. "David, dear," she said in the conspiratorial whisper of someone who lived for gossip, "I hope you don't mind me saying, but your wife has been having quite a few visitors lately." I kept my expression neutral. "Visitors?" "Well, there's that young man with the fancy Jeep. He's been by 3 times this week while you were at work. Very muscular fellow. Handsome, I suppose, if you like that sort of thing." My jaw clenched. Evan had been coming to my house. "I appreciate you letting me know, Mrs. Bohms." "I'm sure there's a perfectly innocent explanation," she said, though her tone suggested she hoped there wasn't. That afternoon, I made an excuse to leave work early and parked down the street from my own house. Sure enough, at 2:30 p.m., Evan's black Jeep Wrangler pulled into my driveway. He walked to my front door like he owned the place, using a key I'd never given him. I sat in my car for 30 minutes, watching my wife entertain her lover in the home I'd been paying for. When Evan finally emerged, his hair was disheveled and his shirt was wrinkled. He paused to light a cigarette on my front porch, the picture of satisfied arrogance. That's when I made my first move. I waited until Evan drove away, then called Tommy. "I need you to meet me at the gym tonight. Bring your toolkit." "What kind of toolkit?" "The kind that teaches pretty boys about consequences." Elite Fitness was Millbrook's premier gym, the kind of place where wealthy housewives paid premium prices to pretend they were serious about health. Alicia had joined 2 years ago, claiming she needed to invest in herself. Now I understood what kind of investment she'd been making. Tommy and I arrived at 9 p.m., well after closing time. The parking lot was empty except for Evan's Jeep, which he'd left in the space marked staff only. "Nice ride," Tommy observed. "Shame if something happened to it." We got to work. Tommy disabled the engine while I took care of the interior. A bag of frozen shrimp, strategically placed in the air vents, would create an interesting aroma in a few days. Sugar in the gas tank was a myth, but fish sauce on the upholstery was very real. For the finishing touch, I left a note under his windshield wiper. "Some equipment should stay in the gym. A concerned citizen." The next morning, I was having coffee at the diner across from Elite Fitness when Evan discovered our handiwork. Even from a distance, I could see his face turn red as he tried to start his Jeep. When the smell hit him, he actually staggered backward. He called someone, probably Alicia, and spent 10 minutes pacing around his disabled vehicle, gesturing angrily. Finally, he had to call a tow truck. I paid for my coffee and headed to work, whistling for the first time in weeks. But Evan Lockwood wasn't just some pretty boy with muscles. As I was about to learn, he had a temper to match his ego. That evening, as I was leaving my office, I found him waiting by my car. Up close, he was even more imposing than I'd expected, at least 6'3", with the kind of build that came from years of serious training. "You think you're clever?" he said without preamble. "I think you have me confused with someone else." He stepped closer, trying to use his size to intimidate me. "I know it was you. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I'd been taking martial arts classes for 15 years, not because I was looking for fights, but because I'd grown up in a rough neighborhood where knowing how to defend yourself was a survival skill. Evan might have had size and muscle, but he moved like someone who'd never been in a real fight. "I'm going to go home to my wife," I said calmly. "You should probably do the same." "Oh wait, you don't have one." His face flushed. "Alicia deserves better than some pathetic—" I held up a hand. "Stop right there. Whatever's going on between you and my wife, that's between you and my wife. But if you ever come to my workplace again, If you ever threaten me again, you'll discover that small-town lawyers can be very creative when it comes to making someone's life difficult. He wanted to take a swing at me. I could see it in his eyes. But something in my expression must have warned him off, because he stepped back instead. "This isn't over," he said. "No," I agreed. "It's just getting started." The thing about small towns is that everyone knows everyone else's business. In a place like Millbrook, reputation is currency, and I was about to make some very expensive withdrawals from both Evan and Alicia's accounts. My first stop was Sophie Martinez, Alicia's social media-obsessed friend who worked as a marketing coordinator for the local country club. Sophie had never liked me. I wasn't wealthy enough or connected enough for her taste, but she had one weakness. She couldn't resist gossip. I found her at the coffee shop downtown, laptop open, probably updating someone's Instagram account. "Sophie," I said, sliding into the chair across from her. "Mind if I join you?" She looked up, surprised. "Dave, hi, I was just working. I know. Listen, I need some advice about social media. Professional advice." Her eyes lit up. Sophie loved being asked for professional advice almost as much as she loved gossip. "What kind of advice?" I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the photos I'd taken of Evan and Alicia kissing in the hotel parking lot. I'd cropped it carefully. You could see them embracing, but nothing explicit. "Someone sent this to me anonymously," I said. "I'm not sure what to do with it." Sophie's eyes widened as she recognized both figures. "Oh my God. Dave, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Actually, you did know. I heard you talking about it at Roxanne's last weekend." Her face went pale. We weren't. I mean, relax. I'm not angry with you. But I am curious about something. How long has this been going on?" Sophie looked around nervously, then leaned forward. "Dave, you have to understand, we all thought you knew. The way Alicia talked about your marriage, it sounded like you two were basically roommates." "What exactly did she say?" "That you hadn't been intimate in months. That you were more interested in your work than in her. That she felt like she was married to a stranger." Each word was a small betrayal, but I kept my expression neutral. "I see. And Evan? What's his story?" He's not exactly the settling down type. Alicia thinks she can change him, but honestly, he's been with half the married women in this town. It's kind of his thing." This was news to me. "Half the married women?" Sophie nodded, warming to the subject. "Linda Peterson, Maria Santos, even Judge Feldman's wife. He targets unhappy wives, makes them feel special for a few months, then moves on to the next one. Judge Feldman was my old mentor, the man who'd encouraged me to open my own practice. The idea that Evan had been targeting his wife filled me with cold rage. "Sophie," I said carefully, "how would you like to do me a favor? A big one?" "What kind of favor?" I leaned back in my chair. "The kind that would make you the center of attention for weeks. The kind that would give you the biggest story this town has seen in years." Her eyes lit up with interest. 2 hours later, Sophie had everything she needed to destroy Evan Lockwood's reputation. I'd provided her with carefully edited photos, a list of his previous conquests, and enough background information to paint him as a predator who targeted vulnerable married women. By evening, the story was spreading through Millbrook's social networks like wildfire. Sophie had crafted it perfectly, not as malicious gossip, but as a public service announcement warning women about a dangerous manipulator. The photos of Evan with various married women, all taken from his own social media accounts, were damning. The testimonials from his previous victims, whom Sophie had contacted directly, were devastating. By the time Alicia came home from her yoga class that night, Evan Lockwood was the most hated man in Millbrook. "How was yoga?" I asked as she walked through the door. She looked shaken. "Fine. Just fine." "You look upset. Everything okay?" There's some drama at the gym." Someone's been spreading rumors about one of the trainers. That's terrible. What kind of rumors? She hesitated. Just inappropriate behavior with clients. It's probably all lies, but you know how people talk. I do indeed know how people talk, I said. Would you like some wine? You look like you could use it. As I poured her a glass of Chardonnay, my phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. Phase 1 complete. Ready for Phase 2? I typed back, give me 24 hours. Alicia was about to learn that her problems were just beginning. The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. I was in my office reviewing a contract when my secretary buzzed me. Dave, there's a Max Brennan on line 1. Says he's calling about your wife? Max Brennan was the owner of Elite Fitness, Alicia's boss, and according to my research, a man who'd been harboring feelings for my wife for the better part of 2 years. I'd seen the way he looked at her at the gym's holiday party, like a starving man staring at a steak dinner. Mr. Halperin? Max's voice was tight with stress. I'm calling about the situation with Evan Lockwood. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with any situation. The photos, the stories that are circulating online, your wife is mentioned in several of them. This was interesting. I'd made sure Alicia wasn't directly named in any of Sophie's posts. I'm still not following you, Max. He sighed. Look, I'm going to be direct. Evan's been terminated. The stories about him are, well, they're damaging to our reputation. But there are also implications for Alicia, and I wanted to give you a heads up. What kind of implications? Several clients have mentioned seeing them together outside of work, at hotels, restaurants. I'm not making any accusations, but I need to protect the business. Of course you do. What does that mean for Alicia? I'm suspending her pending an internal investigation. It's just temporary, until this all blows over. I hung up the phone and leaned back in my chair. Alicia was about to lose her job. Evan was already destroyed, and I hadn't even played my best cards yet. That afternoon, I decided it was time to have a conversation with Judge Feldman. I found him in his chambers during a recess, looking older than his 65 years. David, he said warmly, what brings you by? I wanted to talk to you about a personal matter. It's delicate. His expression grew serious. Close the door. I sat across from his desk, the same desk where he'd sworn me in as an attorney 15 years ago. Judge, I've recently learned some things about Evan Lockwood that I thought you should know. His face darkened. That bastard, what about him? You've heard the stories? My wife told me everything last night. How he manipulated her, made her feel young and desired again. How he convinced her that I didn't appreciate her anymore. He rubbed his temples. 32 years of marriage, and I almost lost it to some muscle-bound predator. I'm sorry, Judge. I know this must be difficult. What I don't understand is how he's been getting away with this for so long. Someone should have stopped him years ago. I leaned forward. What if I told you there was a way to make sure he never does this to another family? Judge Feldman's eyes met mine. I'd say I'm listening. An hour later, I had everything I needed. Judge Feldman had connections throughout the state legal system, and Evan Lockwood's past was about to be scrutinized very carefully. It turned out that targeting married women wasn't his only questionable behavior. There were issues with his personal training certifications, his business licenses, and several complaints that had been swept under the rug. That evening, Alicia came home in tears. They suspended me, she said, collapsing onto our couch. Max said it was temporary, but I know what that means. My career is over. I sat beside her, playing the supportive husband. I'm sure it will all work out. These things usually do. You don't understand. The things people are saying about Evan, about me, what are they saying about you? She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. That I was sleeping with him. That I'm just another one of his conquests. Were you? The question hung in the air between us. For a moment, I thought she might tell me the truth. Instead, she chose to lie one more time. Of course not. How could you even ask me that? I nodded slowly. You're right. I'm sorry. I should trust my wife. She leaned against me, and I put my arm around her, feeling like I was comforting a stranger. Dave, she said softly, I think we should get away for a while. Maybe take that trip to Europe we've been talking about. Europe, where she could disappear with whatever money she'd managed to save, probably to meet up with Evan once this all blew over. That's a great idea, I said. Why don't you start planning it? She smiled for the first time in days. Really? Really. You deserve a fresh start. She had no idea how fresh that start was going to be. 3 days later, everything came to a head in the most public way possible. It was Friday night, and the monthly town council meeting was being held at the community center. These meetings were usually boring affairs attended by a dozen retirees and local business owners. But tonight was different. Tonight, Judge Feldman was presenting a proposal for new business licensing requirements, specifically targeting fitness professionals. I'd suggested that Alicia attend, telling her it might affect her job situation. She'd reluctantly agreed, not knowing that half the town would be there. The community center was packed. Word had somehow spread that there would be important announcements about the recent scandal at Elite Fitness. Sophie had done her job well. Everyone wanted to hear the latest gossip firsthand. Alicia and I sat in the third row, surrounded by familiar faces. I spotted Mrs. Bohms, Roxanne, Tommy, and dozens of others. Even Max Brennan was there, looking uncomfortable in a suit that was too tight. Judge Feldman took the podium and began his presentation about business licensing. It was dry, technical stuff that had most people checking their phones within minutes. But then he shifted gears. Before we vote on these proposals, he said, I think it's important that we address the recent events that have shaken our community. We've all heard the stories about predatory behavior, about individuals who have taken advantage of vulnerable people, who have destroyed families for their own gratification. The room grew quiet. Beside me, Alicia shifted uncomfortably. I want to read you something, Judge Feldman continued, pulling out a sheet of paper. This is from a complaint filed with the state licensing board earlier this week. He began to read a detailed account of Evan's behavior, naming names, citing specific incidents. The room was dead silent as he described a pattern of manipulation and abuse that went back years. When he finished, he looked directly at our section of the audience. Evan Lockwood has left town, he announced. His business license has been revoked, and he's facing potential criminal charges in 3 counties, but he didn't act alone. He had help from people who enabled his behavior, who covered for him, who participated in the destruction of marriages and families. That's when I stood up. Judge Feldman, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. I'd like to address the council. Alicia grabbed my arm. Dave, what are you doing? I gently removed her hand and walked to the front of the room. Every eye in the place was on me. My name is David Halperin, I began. Most of you know me. I've lived in this town for 20 years, practiced law here for 15. I've helped many of you with legal problems, property disputes, family matters. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces. 3 weeks ago, I discovered that my wife has been having an affair with Evan Lockwood. Not only that, but she's been planning to leave me, to take half of everything I've worked for, and to start a new life with a man who, as we've just heard, is a predator and a criminal. The room erupted in whispers. I heard Alicia gasp behind me, but I continued. I could have handled this quietly. I could have filed for divorce, divided our assets, and moved on with my life. But then I learned something else. I learned that my wife and her friends have been mocking me for months, calling me pathetic, ordinary, broke, laughing about how clueless I was. I turned to look at Alicia, who was pale as a ghost. I also learned that she's been bringing this man into our home, into our bed, while I was at work, trying to build a life for us. The whispers grew louder. Someone in the back shouted, "Tell us what really happened." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder. "I have photographs," I announced. "Text messages, hotel receipts, a complete record of an affair that has been going on for 8 months. Alicia stood up, tears streaming down her face. "Dave, please, don't do this." "Don't do what, Alicia? Tell the truth? Isn't that what you wanted? A fresh start?" She pushed past people in our row and ran toward the exit. But Tommy was waiting by the door, and he stepped aside to let her pass while giving me a thumbs up. I turned back to the crowd. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy," I said. "I'm telling you this because Evan Lockwood didn't destroy families by himself. He had help from people who were willing to betray their spouses, their commitments, their integrity for a few hours of excitement." I opened the folder and pulled out the hotel photos. These were taken last Thursday afternoon at the Marriott downtown. I held up the photos so the entire room could see them. The images were clear, undeniable, and devastating. My wife chose to humiliate me in private. I'm choosing to return the favor in public. The room was completely silent now. Even the whispers had stopped. "Alicia Halperin," I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. "You said I was too poor to deserve you. You said I was ordinary. You said I was pathetic." I smiled, and it felt like the first genuine smile I'd had in months. "You were wrong about everything except one thing. I am ordinary. I'm an ordinary man who believed in ordinary things like marriage, fidelity, and honor. And you threw all of that away for a man who's now facing criminal charges in 3 counties. I closed the folder and looked out at the crowd one last time. "The divorce papers will be filed on Monday morning. Alicia, you'll find them on the kitchen table when you get home, along with the locks I had changed this afternoon." I walked back to my seat, but Alicia was gone. Through the window, I could see her in the parking lot, talking frantically on her phone. Judge Feldman retook the podium. "Well," he said dryly, "I think that concludes our discussion of recent events. All in favor of the new licensing requirements?" The vote was unanimous. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed, in my own house, for the first time in months, without the weight of deception crushing my chest. The locks had indeed been changed, and Alicia's belongings were packed neatly in boxes by the front door. She'd tried calling 47 times during the night. I'd turned off my phone after the 10th call. At 8 a.m., there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Alicia standing on my porch, looking like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red and swollen, her hair was disheveled, and she was wearing the same clothes from the night before. "Dave," she said, her voice hoarse. "We need to talk." "No, we don't. Please, just give me 5 minutes." I stepped aside and let her in, but I didn't offer her a seat. "I made a mistake," she began. "A terrible mistake, but what you did last night, what I did last night was tell the truth. You humiliated me in front of the entire town. You humiliated yourself. I just provided the documentation." She started crying again. "Dave, I love you. I know I screwed up, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can—" "Alicia, stop." Something in my voice made her freeze. "You don't love me. You never loved me. You loved the idea of being married to a lawyer, of having a nice house and a respectable husband. But you never loved me. That's not true." I pulled out my phone and played one of the audio recordings I'd made from her text messages. Her voice, digitized but unmistakable, filled the room. "He's so pathetic. Evan makes me feel alive in ways Dave never could." She stared at the phone in horror. "I have hours of these," I said. "Months of messages where you and Evan discuss my shortcomings in detail, where you plan your future together, where you laugh about how easy it was to fool me." "Dave, You what? You're sorry? You didn't mean it? You were confused?" She nodded desperately. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to take your boxes and leave. You're going to move in with your sister in Albany, or your parents in Florida, or wherever you want to go. But you're not staying in Millbrook." This is my home too. Not anymore. The house is in my name only. I bought it before we were married, remember? You insisted on keeping your finances separate. Her face went white as she realized the implications. The car is leased in my name. The credit cards are in my name. Your gym membership, your country club membership, even your cell phone plan, all in my name. You can't just cut me off. I'm not cutting you off. I'm divorcing you. There's a difference. I walked to the kitchen table and picked up a manila envelope. These are the divorce papers. I'm filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery, which in New York State affects the division of assets. Since I have extensive documentation of your affair, and since most of our assets are in my name anyway, you'll be entitled to very little. She took the envelope with shaking hands. I've also included a restraining order, I continued. You're not allowed to contact me except through attorneys. You're not allowed to come to my home or my office. You're not allowed to harass my friends or colleagues. Dave, please, you can't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm protecting myself from you. There was another knock at the door. Through the window, I could see a police car in my driveway. That would be Officer Martinez, I said. He's here to escort you off the property and to make sure you don't violate the restraining order. Alicia looked at me with a mixture of hatred and desperation. You'll regret this, she said. When you're alone and miserable, you'll remember what you threw away. What I threw away? I laughed. Alicia, I didn't throw anything away. You did. You threw away 8 years of marriage for a few months with a criminal who's probably moved on to his next victim already. Officer Martinez knocked again. Time to go, I said. She picked up one of the boxes and walked toward the door, then turned back. I hope you're happy, she said. I considered the question seriously. You know what? I think I will be. She left with Officer Martinez, and I watched through the window as they loaded her boxes into his patrol car. She didn't look back. An hour later, Tommy arrived with beer and pizza. So, he said, settling onto my couch, how does it feel to be a free man? I thought about it. Like I've been holding my breath for months and can finally exhale. Any regrets? Just one. What's that? I should have done it sooner. We spent the rest of the morning watching football and not talking about my marriage. It was the most relaxed I'd felt in years. That afternoon, Mrs. Bomez knocked on my door with a casserole and a knowing smile. I thought you might need a home-cooked meal, she said. Thank you, Mrs. Bomez. That's very kind. David, dear, I hope you don't mind me saying, but you look like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders. It has. Good. That woman never deserved you anyway. As the sun set on what had been one of the most eventful weeks of my life, I sat on my back porch with a beer and thought about the future. For the first time in years, it looked bright. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Saw the news. You did the right thing. Evan. Even from whatever hole he'd crawled into, he was still trying to cause trouble. I typed back, don't contact me again. Ever. Then I blocked the number and deleted the message. Some chapters of your life deserve to be closed permanently.